Welcome to another episode of Systematic Geekology. This is a space where we seek to create and cultivate healthy conversations between those things we geek out on and the philosophical and theological questions that often arise out of our fandoms. Like, what does it mean to be human? What makes a hero? What makes a villain? How do the stories and narratives we geek out on shape how we live in the world? We are your priest to the geeks. We aren't all ordained, but we see ourselves as mediators at the intersection of geek culture and going deeper in our faith. We don't always have to agree, but we do respect each other, and we see everyone as a beloved child of God. Everyone geeks out on something, so come geek out with us and enjoy the show.
This show is a proud member of the Anazal Podcast Network.
Which mutants do you want to see in Avengers Doomsday? Hello, this is Systematic Geekology. We are the priest of the geeks, and I am one of your geekologists, Kevin Schaefer, here with Christian Ashley and Andy Walsh. Christian, Andy, how are you guys tonight?
It's a nice night.
I'm excited.
This is one I will, especially Andy, Christian obviously too, but like Andy, this one in particular I had to get you on for, because I don't know if we've actually ever really discussed the movie specifically. We've talked X-Men comics plenty of times, but this I'm actually really curious to get both your thoughts here. But so the other day, for listeners, viewers, Christian and I were texting, and I follow a blog that is where a blogger, podcaster I know I've been following for years, Hector Navarro. He started a blog this year called My Year of Marvel, where he's chronicling rewatching every MCU movie, every Fox X-Men movie leading up to Avengers Doomsday, which of course comes out in December of this year. And he's doing retrospective thoughts on each movie, reviewing tie-in comics. And I was talking with Christian and I wanted to do something like that. I figured it would be difficult to do an episode for every single movie, because with combining the Fox X-Men and the MCU, we're looking at like over 50. And we've got a lot of episodes, and I hate to tell viewers out here, but we do not do this for a living as much as we would want to, as what we love. This is something we do for fun. But I still wanted to do something to that effect. So all that said, this is the start of a new series called Doomsday Prep. And so while we can't go through do an episode for every single movie, we decided to group these together. And so tonight we're going to be looking at the first Fox X-Men trilogy. So X-Men X2 and X-Men The Last Stand. So Christian and I were both on board, and I knew I absolutely had to have Andy on this one, because if you've listened to Systematic Geekology at all, particularly Comic Book Catch-Up, you know that Andy is a huge X-Men fan, and so much so that Multiple Man is his favorite comic book character of all time, which I love that. And so I'm really curious. This will be a really fun discussion. So we are going to, go through each of those movies, kind of share our thoughts, look at them retrospectively. So I'm really excited. And if you are new to the show, please, or if you've been here for a while, please like, rate, review. We really appreciate it. Any support helps us out a ton. So tell your friends. And if you click on, whether you're watching this on YouTube now or if you're listening to this later, you can click on the description and you can find ways there to support the show. So we really appreciate it. Well, guys, before we get into the main topic tonight, just briefly, what are some things you guys have been geeking out on?
Well, I'm continuing on trying to watch every horror movie by chronological order. I'm in 1935, and I just finished Mad Love, which to my Batman fans out there is the inspiration for a Joker and Harley Quinn, and not in the way I expected. It's a very interesting movie. I really enjoyed it, and I had preconceptions that were totally wrong.
That's interesting. I do that's one I've not seen. I know the history of it and the Batman inspiration, but that's fascinating though. Yeah. Well, I thought I was going through the whole MCU catalog, but going through every horror movie like chronologically of all time, that's quite a feat there, Christian. I love it. But yeah.
I have no life. It's fine.
I mean, hey, even if we did, we would still opt to, just consume movies and comic books. But yeah. But Andy, what about you?
Well, I've been sucked into the mixed doubles curling at the Olympics. That was exciting to watch the U.S. pair win the first medal for the U.S. in that event. And also, I don't think I mentioned this book on the podcast yet that I got for Christmas. It's called The Mimicking of Known Successes. And it is essentially a gender-flipped Sherlock Holmes on Jupiter. And it is as delightful as that sounds, or maybe more delightful, depending on your estimation of that premise. But yeah, it's a cozy murder mystery set in the future in a sci-fi premise on Jupiter, a permanent human colony on Jupiter, and the mists and fog that are created by living on a gas planet stand in for the fog of the English moors. And so it really, really works much better than I thought as like a very straightforward Sherlock Holmes, pastiche or homage. So there's several more in the series that I'm hoping to get to at some point. But yeah, I would recommend those books.
That sounds fascinating.
What's the name of that again, Andy?
The first one is called The Mimicking of Known Successes. Okay. The author is Malka Older. And I believe there are 3 total so far.
Interesting. I love the title. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and then on my end, so I'm going to make people jealous depending on if you're a Noah Khan fan, but I won the Ticketmaster war yesterday and managed to secure tickets for Noah Khan in July, and I've been very much geeking out on his newest single, The Great Divide. That's also the name of the tour and his upcoming album, but the music video he released for that is fantastic, so wonderful artist, and really excited for that show, especially since I've been mostly hibernating throughout January. I'm very much ready for summer for that, and GalaxyCon will be the same weekend. So I'm sure I'll be exhausted after, but it'll be well worth it. But yeah, but surprising, I thought when I got on into the queue on Ticketmaster and there were over 4,000 people ahead of me, I was like, oh, it's not going to happen. But somehow I was blessed and I made it through. So, my condolences to anyone. I know there were many who were not as fortunate, but I am excited there. So awesome. All right, guys. Well, let's get into it. So the first movie we're going to cover is the one that started it all, the original X-Men movie in 2000, directed by Bryan Singer. And, this is fascinating. I'll just give, I'll give just a brief spiel here as far as what, this movie is about. It opens with a little bit of Magneto's origin in the Holocaust and also Rogue's origin, establishing this ensemble dynamic. Rogue and Wolverine become the point of view characters as the mutants who are introduced to the world of Xavier, the world of Magneto. Magneto has his own plans with the Brotherhood of Evil and is planning an attack on Liberty Island. Bunch of superhero stuff ensues from that. But yeah, this came out at a time when, well before when comic book movies dominated the box office, and certainly there hadn't been even many solo origin movies, so a big team up like this was really revolutionary. Also, before I just want to put a note out there before we get into a discussion, it's pretty well documented that like the directors we're going to discuss tonight are pretty well documented as pretty horrible people and have abusive background. I just want to put that out there. That's a little, we're not really going to get into that, but it's like I feel a little weird saying Bryan Singer and Brett Ratner and talking about the work, but we're just going to talk about the work itself. But I did want to put that out there because I know they've had both, unfortunately, very, a lot of allegations, reports, etc. So, but I'm really curious for you guys. First off, what do you guys remember about seeing this movie for the first time? Andy, let's start with you because you are, again, the resident X-Men expert. I'm really curious what it was like back in 2000 when this came out.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the circumstances around this movie, I think, a little bit even more than I remember my response to the movie. So this came out in the summer of 2000. I had graduated from college I was engaged to be married and enrolled in a graduate school program to start that fall. So, a big transition period in my life. And I was working that summer in the Tower Records. Boys and girls gather around. Once upon a time, we sold music in stores on physical platters that spun around. And some of them were called records, some of them were called cassettes, some of them were called CDs. And there were places called Tower Records and other record stores where you go and buy this music. And I worked at such a place. It was a really fun job, had a great time there. And I just remember, driving home from Tower Records one Friday night and going, oh, hey, I have a car and money and time, and I can just go see a movie in the movie theater if I want to. And I just remember kind of being like, oh yeah, I'm an adult now, and not so much beholden to what my parents tell me what to do. I can just go see this movie. And so so I remember kind of cruising around trying to find a movie theater that was showing and a showing that was working. And it was definitely it was definitely exciting for the reason you point out. We had kind of a lull in comic movies. The Batman and Robin had come out. At the time, it felt like it was ages between Batman and Robin and like Spider-Man and X-Men. And then looking back, it was only a couple of years. There really wasn't this fallow period. And there had been Blade in there as well. Mm-hmm. So there really wasn't this fallow period of superhero movies the way that it sometimes gets portrayed in hindsight. But yeah, at the time, it was made a big deal that Batman and Robin had done poorly, and that there wouldn't be any more of these silly comic book movies, and so the X-Men had to be very serious and wear black leather and not be so colorful and so forth. Yes. So it was definitely a mixed bag in terms of, yes, it's exciting to see the X-Men. Yes, it's exciting to see a whole team of characters introduced for the first time and brought together well. But also, there were a lot of compromises and a lot of changes from the comic books, not all of which I think were for the better. And so, it's it was definitely and not that they kind of cancel each other out, but for every thing that you can list that this movie does absolutely right, casting Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen and Hugh Jackman, you can point to, and retaining the pathos that comes with the, Magneto's Holocaust origins and so forth. You can point to, things like, Wolverine is too tall, or Rogue, is completely unrecognizable as the character from the comics, to, the costumes and so forth as things that, as a X-Men comic book fan, were kind of maybe, kind of caught in your crawl a little bit. So, but yeah, it was definitely exciting. I think it was more positive than negative overall. At least it was a positive experience to see. It got me excited about, future X-Men movies, and, got me excited. There was a period where I wasn't reading the comic books quite as closely. But, it would eventually get me, kind of back interested in reading the comics as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, you can totally see it's been documented that the influence of the Matrix, and like you said, when Hollywood was afraid of making, quote unquote, silly comic movies or anything that really brought the comics themselves to life, and wanted to go for that more gritty, realistic, edgy approach. And this is an interesting, I think, balance between the two. We'll get into that more. But Christian, you and I are closer in age, and I did not see this one in theaters when it came out. I was too young. Do you remember if you got to see it then, or what was your background with this one?
We saw it fairly early, my dad and I. Mm-hmm. I can't remember if anyone else came with us. Probably not, because we would probably be the only two who would care. My brother would have been too young. I was 10 when this came out, or thereabouts. And I do remember, I knew the X-Men from the cartoon. I had I hadn't read the X-Men comics at that point in time. Most of my experience comics-wise just came from, when Nightcrawler was helping Spider-Man and the Punisher against Jigsaw, or, Iceman was showing up to help him out with this corrupt mayor, or the Marvel team-up stuff, or Secret Wars was probably what I knew them most from. Reading those, but then seeing them on screen, it's oh man, I'm 10 and this is awesome. And I'm well, why does Rogue not look like Rogue? It doesn't make sense. She should be able to fly, and she has super strength. And I think that was the first time my dad was ever able to explain the idea of other companies owning, characters versus this company doesn't. And being so disappointed but also really excited because I got to see Wolverine on screen and Cyclops and Professor X, Magneto, and all these other things. It's like, oh man, is it a perfect movie? Absolutely not. But you know what? It got the X-Men on the screen, and you know what? If that's the first time they're able to do it, this is the first time they were able to do it, and it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. And, and it's interesting, like, Rogue is the biggest deviation, I would say, at least in this movie from the comics. But I also, just looking at it as a movie itself, I do love what they do with her, just from a story lens. And I love Anna Paquin. And I think, like, it was an interesting, to have her story being, all these other characters have these cool powers. For her, it's like she's terrified of hers, and it explores those themes of the dichotomy between like some mutants that are really embracing their identity and their powers, and then others who feel like it's a curse, and that remains a theme throughout. Not just this trilogy, but throughout the Fox X-Men universe, and so I like that but it is the thing with adaptations, and again going back to all of the reasons that this is a different look from the comics and the cartoons, and where Hollywood was at the time. But yeah, for me, again, so I was about 7. And I mean, I definitely remember seeing the Spider-Man movies in theaters, but I don't know that my parents would have taken me to X-Men. Like, funnily enough, I remember because I started recollecting the figures from these movies a few years ago, but I did have several of these for Christmas that year, because I remember having Professor X and Magneto from the movies like for Christmas that year. So I was still getting the toys, but I can't remember honestly exactly when I watched this movie, but it was probably a little bit later on DVD. But yeah, so I honestly don't remember my reaction to it at the time. I also grew up on the 90s cartoon, hadn't really read the comics yet at this point. But I was familiar with the characters and whatnot. X2 had more, like, that came out at a better time where I could really watch these, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But for this movie, when I rewatched it a few weeks ago, what I was amazed by was, like I said, it's an ensemble story, and it has really 4 central characters with Xavier, Magneto, Wolverine, and Rogue, along with a cast of supporting characters like Jean and Storm and Cyclops and everyone. And what I was really impressed by and surprised was this movie is only an hour and 45 minutes, and it manages to, I would say, balance, especially those 4 leading roles quite well. You understand who they are, you understand their motivations, they're not over-explained, but you get, okay, Xavier believes in a future where mutants and humans can coexist peacefully. Magneto believes in mutant superiority. Wolverine is a loner and, has amnesia, and he's desperate in many ways to learn about his past, but he doesn't know where he fits in. Rogue is also an outsider who is afraid of her powers. Like, it sets all of that up really well, and it sets up the character dynamics. It has a good, action adventure superhero story in there, a good final battle, and it does it all under 2 hours. And, you have movies today that are, 2.5, 3, and that don't even cover that don't have, like, compelling character arcs. And so I was really impressed by that on a rewatch. So that was sort of my introduction. But Andy, I know you said you remember more the feelings around the movie at that time versus like how you actually thought about it, the cultural impact. But if you had to, thinking about your thoughts on it overall, what would you say about this movie now? And you can compare it now to, all the other superhero blockbusters that have come out since.
Sure. Well, following up on what you just said, shout out to Zach Penn, who gets a writing credit on this film and a writing credit on the first Avengers film. And yep. I think both of those do a very good job of introducing an ensemble of characters in a very economical way. How much of that is him? Couldn't tell you, but, he is the credited common writing line there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I get what they, like you said about Rogue, I get why they had to change that. And I think I appreciated that at the time, that the whole Ms. Marvel, Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers of it all was too much to fit into her backstory. You need that kind of audience surrogate character, and you get she kind of serves that role. Wolverine kind of serves that role to some degree. And they kind of merge her with Kitty Pryde, despite the fact that Kitty Pryde also appears as a character in this film, played by the first of three different actresses. Across,
throughout the trilogy.
Or actors, apologies. So, yeah, I get that we're doing. Like I said, I think it does more well than it doesn't, or the overall shape of it was positive. It didn't quite feel. I think I would say that it didn't quite feel exactly like the X-Men to me. Maybe it's the costumes. I think it's more the lineup. Right, a big part of what I like about X-Men, with something Will Rose and I have in common is, we like team books. We like the dynamics of team books, the way the characters interact with each other, those different relationships, and so forth. And so, one thing that's always mystified me about some of these comic book films and TV shows or whatever is that they'll just take kind of random characters. And the X-Men movies have gotten worse and worse about this over time, especially in the more recent films that we aren't discussing tonight, but we'll probably get to. They'll just, grab. It's just like, playing lottery or roulette or something. Just, spin the wheel and, okay, this character and this character and this character. It's like those characters have never interacted on the page before. They have no established dynamic. That's not to say they couldn't have an interesting dynamic, but, why don't you? There's so many interesting relationships in the comic books that have been established for you, that have been road tested, demonstrated to have long lasting appeal. Why don't you use more of those? And so, yeah, to see this lineup, I think that was kind of my biggest disappointment with the film, is just that it's a lineup of characters, a lot of whom don't really have either don't have relationships in the comics, or don't have the relationships that are depicted in the film. Obviously, the Magneto Xavier dynamic gets a lot of attention in these films. The Cyclops Jean Grey, Wolverine triangle gets a lot of attention in these films, and those have their precedence on the page. But the Wolverine Rogue relationship is much more like the Wolverine Kitty relationship from the comics. Storm doesn't really have the dynamic with any of the characters that she has, and she's such a rich character and has such nuanced relationships with these characters on the page, and we see very little of that on screen. And yeah, so I think, and it's not an original criticism, but yeah, I think that's maybe the biggest shortcoming of these films, is that there's so much emphasis placed on Wolverine, placed on Xavier and Magneto, and obviously there's a lot of thematically rich material to draw from there, and so you can see why Hollywood wants to keep going back to them. And then you've got such compelling actors that they've cast in those roles that obviously you want to give them as much to do as possible. But Halle Berry's no slouch. Herself, James Marsden is delightful in many another film, so yeah, there were definitely folks on the sidelines who could have done more in these films, but what the films do well, they do very, very well, and it helps to smooth over the less exciting bits, or the less satisfying bits. And, and then there's also just, there is a lot of fun little fan moments they do, for every once in a while, you'll just get, oh, the basketball court is opening up for the X-Jet to take off, as depicted in, like, not just on the page in the comics, but like in handbook manuals and things of, the official blueprints of Xavier's mansion. That's canonically where they park the plane, or, the little, kid mutants that get like 3 seconds of screen time that, you can go, well, just based on their power, I know who that is, even if they don't give them a name, but it's fun to see that, that Whiz Kid or whoever gets a little bit of a nod. So yeah, there, there's a lot of fun to be had. There's definitely some shortcomings, but, I just recently rewatched all these films, cause I've been following along on your recommendation with Hector's blog. And, I think I was more positive on them than I expected to be after, I've been kind of telling myself, I can't wait for the MCU to do the X-Men right. And I've kind of been disappointed, but that they keep kind of bringing back the Fox X-Men and so forth. But I think partly that's colored by, Dark Phoenix and X-Men Apocalypse and so forth, and that so many of the more recent films have been underwhelming in a way that I've maybe lost my appreciation for what these early films did well. So it was fun to revisit them and be reminded of that again.
Howdy guys, I really hate to interrupt, but my name's TJ, and I'm here to tell you about our new merch. We have incredible new stuff with Fourth Wall. We have just partnered with them as a new store. They have a lot more to offer, which means we have a lot more to offer. We can now offer you beautiful Comfort Colors t-shirts. They're so comfy. I wear mine all the time, and we've got it all now. Cups, hats, backpacks, pajamas. If you want your Systematic Geekology pajamas, you know where to go. My personal favorite is actually our Throne of Geeks shirt. It is Comfort Colors, blue, black, green, red, orange, and the shirts are just so nice. And the shirt itself, we've got the Throne of Iron geeked out because that's our brand. We've got Mjolnir on there, the Buster Sword, Trident. Basically just the coolest weapons from our favorite properties are on the shirt instead of a bunch of normal boring swords from the boring series Game of Thrones. So check that out, and thank you.
Yeah, just as a spoiler warning, I'll have much nicer things to say tonight than I will when we get to some of those later titles that you just mentioned. And I totally agree with you about Cyclops and Storm. That is the one of like you said, I get why they want to emphasize, Xavier, Magneto, Wolverine, especially when you have perfectly cast roles there and you have a lot of thematic material to draw from. But at the same time, Cyclops and Storm, great characters in comics that they made really one note, and they had great actors in the roles. Is Storm, of course, we have to bring it up that at the end of this movie where, I'd say the dialogue is pretty good for the most part, but then in that final battle, the infamous line where Storm says to Toad, you know what happens to a toad when you get struck by lightning? Same thing that happens to everyone else. I was like, oh gosh, you made Halle Berry say that. Like, what? Come on.
Which is the result of a huge script change.
Yes.
Because that was going to be like his catchphrase in the original draft. But now it's a non sequitur.
It's just like, there are many times, I'm about to say this repeatedly throughout viewing the Fox X-Men movies, where it's like, just put us in a time machine, the three of us in a time machine, get us into the writer's room, because we could easily save, several.
But that's one of the cool things about this film, though, is it actually created something huge for the comics in that Magneto's helmet is what blocks Xavier's telepathy.
True.
That had not existed prior. And I had Mandela affected myself into thinking that it existed prior, but no. And they invent this for the movie, but it's one of those things in hindsight. It's like, why wasn't this a thing beforehand? Because of their natural antagonism. And I love what this does. This movie has some great scenes that have lasted to me to this day, like opening Holocaust, Magneto activating his powers for the first time as someone who was studying that for the first time as a kid, and then seeing it on screen made that very real to me. The death of, it is Senator Kelly in the film, right?
Yes.
When he's injected with the mutant gene and he becomes that blob and then disintegrates into goo. It's like, as a kid, I was horrified for years by that scene. But
and you could buy that action figure.
I love how many toys are made of iconic moments like that.
Other changes they make, like Mystique, like making her, an already very attractive woman into like, she's just not wearing anything, by the way. We're going to cast Rebecca Romaine and we're going to make her go through all that. But then that influences things in the comics a little bit too, to where, is the uniform she's wearing part of her natural outfit, or is there something she's actually wearing? I'm sure they did something beforehand about that. I'm not 100%. But and of course, Wolverine, we were, goodness gracious, what's the miniseries that came out that actually the origin explained his past? That had not come out yet.
That might have been 2005 or 6. It's just called Wolverine Origin.
Came after this.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because we're building up on some of that right here, and obviously the hype of this film, as well as fans have wanted to know it for years, but now they had the impetus to actually go and make that years after the fact, to explain his origins, because it was one of those like people big on, oh, we want the ambiguity. I was like, no, actually explain it. Let us know what happened.
Oh, absolutely. And that's a great comic. I mean, they like sometimes prequel origin ones like that are hit or miss, but now the Wolverine origin movie is a topic for another day. But yeah, and well, I'm glad you brought up it with Mystique there too, because that is, I would say, a major criticism throughout these movies. Not that there aren't strong female characters and wonderful actors in these movies, but the emphasis on sex appeal and and like women in these movies being half naked repeatedly, or that was, I would say, a common theme throughout a lot of these, and that's something that I hope the MCU one will rectify. But at this, Mystique is great. I do love the villains they picked here, having Toad and Sabretooth here as well. And the fight scenes here hold up pretty well for 2000. It's you get some really great moments. I still love the scene when Sabretooth first shows up when Wolverine and Rogue are on the run shortly after they met. It's a great sequence there, and that's when Cyclops and Storm and Jean show up. Love that moment. The Liberty Island sequence still holds up really well. Anytime Xavier and Magneto are just talking, I think like Ian McKellen, I think I could listen to him read the ingredients to Cheez-Its and it would sound Shakespearean. Same with Patrick Stewart. Quick side note, if you go watch Ian McKellen's recent interview on Colbert, and just go watch it, because he does a Shakespeare monologue at the end that is jaw-dropping. The dude is still a legend. But yeah, so there are many strengths. I think we talked about some of his weaknesses. I don't know, are there any other? I know we've still got 2 movies to cover in this episode, so but those are, as far as like where I would put this movie in relation to the others, like we'll do ranking at the end, but my overall thoughts is that I think it still holds up quite well as a superhero ensemble movie. Not perfect by any means, and as far as the deviations from the comics, some of it works, some of it doesn't. I'm glad that they joke about the rejecting the yellow spandex, in a meta line there. That's always, I think, one of the best moments in the movie. Casting, I think, is pretty great across the border. I think the main weaknesses come from, and it's not just with this movie, but it's kind of a symptom throughout the Fox X-Men movies, is that we get kind of the emphasis on the same characters over and over again, whereas there are a lot of interesting ones that they make pretty one note, or just not explored nearly as much as could be. But overall, I think it still holds up pretty well. I also really like the score by Michael Kamen. He was one of my favorite composers, who I think he passed away not long after this one, but he did Mr. Holland's Opus and The Iron Giant. So one of my favorite composers of that time. But yeah, so it certainly has its ups and downs. It's not one of my all-time favorite comic book movies, but for 26 years later, and there have been it seemed like 1,000 since then, it still is quite enjoyable. And again, I like that it's pretty tight at just under 2 hours.
I'll say the greatest strength about the franchise as a whole is casting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen, Hugh Jackman, so on and so forth with our cast here. Yeah, every now and then there's going to be a stinker, but for the most part, they are the characters. They look like them. They speak like them. Patrick Stewart, someone had made the joke 2 years beforehand, I think it was the Planet X novel, crossover between X-Men and Star Trek, where they had said, Professor X, Captain Picard, you kind of look the same. And then 2 years later, we get that. And yeah, it's kind of one of those easy fan things you could suggest, but like seeing it on screen, he has the power to be Professor Xavier. And Ian McKellen has the gravitas to be his opposite force. And but there's also that friendship between them that both actors are portraying, because they're also real life friends, but they're also acting opposite each other and can show that they can be enemies too. I could gush about them, but I just want to say casting, if you want to go for the greatest strength, is probably my number one pick.
Absolutely.
And since you mentioned the fights holding up, quick shout out, another Matrix influence. They brought in Hong Kong legend Corey Yuen to do the fight choreography.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Ke Huy Quan of Short Round fame, and now also an MCU character in his own right. This is one of his handful of credited stunt performer roles.
When Ke Huy Quan won the Oscar a couple of years ago, and like the photo resurfaced of him with Hugh Jackman on the set, and I was like, "This is awesome!" Like, that dude's a legend, and I'm so happy for him that he's had a bit of a renaissance in the years since. He's wonderful. But yeah, awesome. Well, any other thoughts? I know we got the rest of this trilogy to cover tonight. And I'm very excited to talk about the next one. So X2, this was 2002. Was it 2 or 3? Okay, 3.
It's 3 on the poster right there.
3, yes, 2003. Sure, got it. So this is the one that again I hadn't remembered as much like watching the first one the first time. X2, I remember having really on DVD and on TV like a lot throughout, elementary and middle school. This felt like, I feel like this was the kind of, it's different from Spider-Man, and, it maybe is more mature, but this felt like the really cool, like, superhero movie to really get on board with. And, I was still young at the time, but yeah, this one hooked me. And I would say this is probably one, if not, the most revered X-Men movie, certainly up there, by a lot of fans. This was, a great team up between, whereas X-Men set up, the relationship between Xavier and Magneto, and the dichotomy of their views on mutant kind and whether it could be a part of humanity or not. This one forces, them together to fight a bigger threat with William Stryker, and played by the great Brian Cox. Just casting was boom, boom, boom. Like no matter how much the writing faltered throughout this franchise, casting was always solid. And then, of course, we get Nightcrawler here, and one of still the best opening sequences in any comic book movie, when he's mind controlled and does the attack on the White House. That scene just still holds up all these years later. But yeah, this is one, again, I watched all the time. There were just scenes I would love to watch over and over again, especially when Stryker's men attack the Xavier Institute, and you get to see Wolverine go full Wolverine on them and take them out, while Iceman is kind of like, oh, this is, just kind of quivering there a little bit. I love it. But yeah, this movie really builds on everything the first one set up and expands on it. And even the title, X2, X-Men United, it's got, bringing in heroes and villains together, and in a way that didn't feel forced, because, you think about it, it's like at the end of the first movie, Magneto does try to sacrifice Rogue in order to build his weapon, and as part of his plan to dominate mankind. He does really horrible things, but this sets it up that, okay, the monsters of humanity end up being a bigger threat, at least right now, that forces all the mutants together, regardless of their differences, and it leads to a really climactic third act. There's a lot to unpack in this movie. So same question for you guys as the first is like, do you remember what your reactions were and where you were when you first saw X2? Andy, we'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. You mentioned that opening sequence, right? And that just, I remember being compelled by that right from the get-go. That was still and remains, a high watermark for superhero cinema, in the way that it takes a power that doesn't exist in real life and finds a creative way to choreograph an action sequence around it. There's probably only a handful of sequences since then in the, like say 50, 75, 100 comic book superhero movies that we've had since then. I remember being blown away by that right from the start. And then, this is I would say the one that comes the closest to feeling like an X-Men team movie, which is maybe kind of ironic because it also, splits them up, right? You Storm and Jean go on their side quest, and Wolverine goes with the kids on their side quests, and Professor X and Cyclops are captured and off separately. So they're not actually functioning as a team. But I feel like more of the rest of the cast outside of the main characters of Wolverine and Magneto and Cyclops, or Magneto and Professor X, get more time here, get more character development, get more character story arcs, and so it feels more like an X-Men movie and not it's the Wolverine show, guest starring Rogue and Storm. So that was exciting. Thematically, it's adapting more directly a storyline from the comics, a very successful, a very well regarded story from God Loves Man Kills. Yes, there are changes, but you can see the DNA of that story in here in a way that you can't in the first film, and so that was exciting. And this was definitely a highlight, and probably remains my favorite of the X-Men films that they've made so far. I'm happy to have something supersede it going forward. My heart is open to new X-Men movie experiences, but so far this one is the tops for me. And getting to see the kids doing more, and Nightcrawler, not just that opening sequence, but he's a fun character. He has a real heart, a real charm, and probably brings the most out of Storm that we get in any of these films. Right, the two of them interacting is probably the closest that Storm gets to having a real human connection with anybody in any of these films. So.
Fun fact, too, since you mentioned God Loves Man Kills. So when I was in college, I had a film and literature class, and we did ones where we watched X2 and read God Loves Man Kills. And it was pretty awesome. I hope I didn't talk too much during that and let other students, but needless to say, that was it was not hard for me to engage there. But that was a lot of fun. So Christian, what about you?
I was about 12, 13 when this came out. So I think in between then is when I did start reading some of the Uncanny X-Men and the Claremont run that my dad had. So I was getting a little more familiar with them. And as someone, I don't think I've ever actually sat down and listed them off, but I'm pretty sure Nightcrawler is my number one mutant. Loved this film, seeing him included, seeing his powers get used in a really fun way, a menacing way, don't get me wrong, but also a really fun way, because when you actually think about what someone's capable of doing like that, that's definitely something they could do. And then, of course, all the Wolverine backstory we get here. This is when it really starts to become like Wolverine and Friends and his lesser-known pals as time goes on in this franchise. But you know what? As a kid who also really loved Wolverine, I didn't care about it too much. Now I can look back and I can see the warning signs and go, okay, I see where 3 is going after this and then beyond. But for right here now, perfectly fine. As an adaptation of God Loves Man Kills, it works enough. Obviously it's not 1-to-1, but it does the job. You combine that with the Weapon X program and everything there, and the idea of getting rid of mutants in this way, that would later we get to the point of the cure and why Stryker would want a cure. We get because the son is supposed to be mastermind, right? That's the implication.
Jason. Yeah.
Which is obviously a huge change, but you know what? Whatever. You can only adapt so much.
Yeah.
But the fight sequences here. We get the plot thread of Jean becoming, the Phoenix that's set up in this film, and you can argue about how it's done later on, which we will later on in this episode. But it's great. Once again, it's not a perfect film, but for what we had at this point in time, is exactly what it needed to be.
Hey friends, it's your pal Will Rose here, and let me break the fourth wall a moment and look directly at you through the camera, or speak directly to you in your earbuds. Yep, I'm talking to you, Susie. You too, Chad. You can now support Systematic Geekology on Fourth Wall. That's a website. You'll find all of our episodes, incredible merch like shirts and hoodies and mugs. Chad, I would love to see you in one of those shirts out in the wild. You get bonus episodes. We answer bonus questions. We have special shout outs. We have certain episodes that you pick. So you help us create and curate the content that we put out for the world to hear. You even get free merch. And you can support the show at different levels. You could join at the free level. Yep, we love free members, free support. Join it. Or you could become a sidekick for as little as $5 a month. You could join the elves and dwarves for $10 a month. You could become a wizard for $15 a month, or you could go to divinity school and become a cleric for $20 a month. And that's way cheaper than going to seminary, believe me. Or at $25 a month, you could become a superhero. And let me just say, we love all of our listeners, whether you support us at the free level or the superhero level. We love you. We love geeking out with you. Like, support, share the show. Love you.
And I think here too, like with the Wolverine connecting, you know, him playing a big role here, the ties to his origin works with the story here because Stryker is the villain. He's connected directly. I really think if they had made X2 and if they had made a proper X-Men origin Wolverine movie after this, that would have been so great. And then they could have had him not be as central focus in 3 and beyond, because then they would have covered it. But yeah, I mean, you know, but it's like it's a big part here, but there's also, like you said, the team dynamic there. You know, it doesn't feel like characters are just introduced and, oh, they have cool powers, but they're actually given character arcs. And Andy, I like what you said too about the younger ones here. So, you know, Iceman, Rogue, Pyro, really getting their chance to shine here too. And you know, I mean, I like it's a natural way for Pyro to go from Xavier's team to Magneto by the end. Like, I mean, it shows him, you know, naturally getting more unhinged and, you know, fed up with the system. And you know, I love the line when they try to like keep all 3 of them behind in the jet before the final battle. He's like, I'm sick of this kids table. Like, you know, I'm gonna, you know, I'm leaving. And then, you know, it was natural for him to go with Magneto at the end. So, you know, and I realized like Iceman, well, it's when you look at the original 5 X-Men in the comics and Uncanny, yes, they changed a lot here. I mean, Iceman was one of the OGs. So was Angel. You know, they don't bring him in until the 3rd movie, and they make, you know, Cyclops and Jean, Storm more of the OGs. And I mean, this is one of those things with adaptations. I'm less stingy on stuff like that. You can kind of change that, and I like the dynamic between Iceman and Rogue. And Sean Ashmore was, you know, like, well, his brother was Jimmy Olsen in Smallville at this time, so they both got 2 big, you know, comic book roles at the time. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty well balanced throughout. And I mean, Nightcrawler is just, again, not just because of his powers, but we've talked about this on episodes of Comic Book Catch Up before, how, you know, the themes with him being a devout Catholic and, you know, in a like genuine person of faith, where he's not, you know, like portrayed in a lot of movies where he would be, you know, a corrupt, you know, like, and like, you know, making fun of religion. He's like, I love the scene between him and Storm when they're talking about anger and faith, and you know, it's just a really natural thing. It shows how compelling a character he is, and Alan Cummings' performance is fantastic. So yeah, there's just a lot to love. I mean, you know, it's not a perfect movie by any means. None of these are. You know, there's still an imbalance at times, and there's you know, is plot points where the plot just kind of moves along. It's funny. I was reading, it might have been on Hector's blog. Or maybe it was this was a Screen Crush video I was watching, but talking about Xavier, like, you know, I've watched, you know, that scene at the end a million times when Xavier and the X-Men confront the president by interrupting. They freeze time and interrupt him before he's about to make a State of the Union address. And, you know, and Xavier, you know, issues a decree saying, you know, we are watching. And it's actually, you know, it seems like an inspiring moment where he's like, okay, he's asking the president to consider mutant kind, but it's actually pretty creepy when you think about it. It's like, hey, actually, Mr. President, we have a bunch of powers here. We got, you know, I have a kid who can walk through walls. Like, you know, we got all of us here. I have the mutant who tried to assassinate you right here. So, you know, you may want to rewrite your speech here on the fly. But it's but I at the same time, I do like that Xavier is a very morally complex character, and in many ways the movies never really explored that in full. They kind of hint at it, but not nearly as much as in the comics. And so, there are elements there where I wish they had gone a little deeper, made it even more complex. But they kind of hint at those complications, those moral ambiguities. But yeah, I mean, it's still, this is still one that holds up. I think, I say really the main flaws with this movie, I think more have to do with what came after, which we'll get to that. As this one as a whole, I think is a great middle entry in a trilogy and a great entry in a franchise. Again, not perfect by any means, but it does what a good sequel should, in that it builds on everything that the first one set up. It, continues character storylines. It introduces new ones in interesting ways. It has really great iconic moments. I would say, also criticism I would have would be, again, it's inevitable that there are characters that are introduced and kind of tossed aside, but Deathstrike, she doesn't really get any alliance. She's just a Terminator here. And there was more opportunity there. What they did with Jason was, I guess it kind of worked for the movie. It is, again, nothing like the comics at all. But, it's an adaptation. So it's, but when I think about like the strengths and weaknesses of the movie, the strengths definitely outweigh the weaknesses by far. And that's impressive for, one that is all these years later. But you guys have any other thoughts on that?
Nope.
Or, yeah. So, well, now the way I set it up, as far as what could have been. Oh, let's see. So now we come to X-Men: The Last Stand. So a lot to say about this one. I'll go ahead and say, okay, how do I say it? Because I want to be nice first before because there's a lot to, the thing about this movie is that there are two movies crammed into it, and that's even, I mean, if you go into the backstory of how this guy, that's literally the case. Like, they combined two scripts, because first there was Bryan Singer left to go direct Superman, which ironically, Brett Ratner, who directed this, again, I don't really like saying his name, he also directed the new Melania movie, which, whole thing there. But Ratner was also attached to Superman at one point. But Singer went to go to direct that. That is also why Cyclops is barely in this movie and is killed off early, because James Marsden went to go do Superman Returns, which is also alright too, because it's not like he went and played an iconic character. He played one they made up for the movie as Lois Lane's husband. That was two misfires, but but I would say, this movie though, if they could go back, so the two movies they crammed, because they crammed two different scripts into one, and they took bits and pieces. And you can see that totally, because on the one hand, you have the movie revolving around the Cure storyline, which had been in the comics in the Astonishing X-Men. So, and I think that, if I could have picked one to start with, yes, I know they set up and they teased Dark Phoenix at the very end of 2, but also they could have saved it for the next movie. I really do think the Cure storyline is a natural progression for what was set up in the first 2, because you have all of these ideologies about mutant kind and its place in the world, and and whether or not a war with humanity is coming. I think the Cure storyline is a very natural progression of that. A fourth movie could have explored, given its own movie to Dark Phoenix, done it well, done Phoenix in space and done aliens and all of that. That would have made so much more sense. Because if I'm looking at just the writing, there's a lot in the Cure storyline I think is pretty interesting. And for me, when I was rewatching this the other day, the movie started to fall apart about 25 minutes in, when Jean comes back and she kills Cyclops. And it was just, we'll get into that. So, I mean, it's a very messy movie, but I do want to give a shout out further along the note of great casting. So Beast is my favorite mutant, and Kelsey Grammer was perfectly cast as Dr. Hank McCoy. I'm really excited to see him again in Doomsday. I mean, I don't know how much will be good, but they're bringing back both Beast and Nightcrawler. So I'm really excited for that, because really since then we've only seen him. He has a cameo in Days of Future Past at the end, and then he has a cameo in the post-credit scene of The Marvels. But always loved Grammer's Beast. I love Nicholas Hoult as well, but Beast is my guy, and so I do love his portrayal here. They actually wanted to bring Beast in soon. They wanted to bring Beast in the first movie, but budget constraints and, there'd be a lot of effects there. But so I want to, put out the nice things here. But yeah, there's a lot to tear apart about this movie, so we can get into that as well. But Andy, though, what were your thoughts about this one going back to, when it came out? This is a big one in the trilogy. Do you remember what you thought back then?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, so that the World Wide Web was, a central part of our lives by that point, and I had gotten into like following behind the scenes in Hollywood and of these movies, and so I was aware of like all the director changes and script changes and things leading up to the film in a way that I previously was not. The movies just came out and I went and watched them, and the names on the screen were somewhat mysterious to me, but here I was starting to get into, oh yeah, no, I actually know about that other people were supposed to make this movie and it's going to be a different movie. So I came into it with that awareness, and then also you've already mentioned my fondness for Jamie Madrox, the Multiple Man, who makes his triumphant debut in this film as an unrecognizable version of the character, other than the fact that he has the same name and power. But I think I finally come around to, well, we'll just headcanon that this is like the Fallen Angels version of Jamie Madrox, a wayward dupe who wanders off and gets into mischief, and the real Jamie Madrox is somewhere else. Is in Muir Island, in that laboratory in Muir Island with Moira McTaggart, who we meet in this film. So that's my completely justified by the text headcanon of what's going on with Multiple Man in this film. But yeah, so it was I was excited on the one hand. I like Beast because he's the X-Men scientist. I liked Multiple Man, so there were things I was excited about for this film, and yeah, it was definitely. I don't know that I hated it as much as some people did at the time, but it was definitely not the high point. Didn't hit the same highs as X-Men 2.
Yeah,
you could definitely feel the gaps and the seams where they glued things together and had to adjust things at the last minute. And yeah, so it was not surprising that this led to kind of a, well, maybe we need to rethink this our approach here. But yeah, it has some fun elements, but definitely feels more like a missed opportunity than anything else. And it really between this and Spider-Man 3 and all these different things, like it is. As we're building up to Doomsday and thinking about the MCU, one of the things that was remarkable about that was, there were lots of these film franchises that kind of petered out after 3. Like you could make a good first one, you could sometimes make a really, really good second one, and then that was all anybody was good for. And so it was quite impressive to see the Marvel movies, the MCU movies manage to sustain such high quality and to build for so long. So whether you look at the whole franchise as a whole, the 20, 30 some odd films, or even just like individual things like, the Captain America films or the Iron Man films, where you get a third installment that's, as good or better than the ones that came before. The 4 Avengers films, are the last ones are definitely the high point of those. So yeah, this was definitely a time where it just felt like, well, you couldn't do more than 3 movies, and sometimes you were probably better off not having done the third one even. This definitely contributed to that feeling. But yeah, and rewatching it, and knowing what it was, I think I was able to kind of maybe not enjoy it, but be amused by it as it happened, knowing that it's not going to be what I want it to be, knowing it's not going to be the Jamie Madrox showcase that I might have dreamed of one day at one point. But it is what it is. It does develop things that we'd seen before. It is kind of in some ways the logical next step for some of these characters, and the Cure story is interesting. But something that really stood out to me watching it now that I don't think I noticed at the time was just how much of a like, oh, you just shouldn't let women be powerful element of the story. Like it doesn't really seem to have a whole lot more justification for why it's okay for, you know, Magneto and Charles Xavier to have these world shaping powers, but Jean Grey, you know, they both have to be, you know, paternalistic towards and you know, wag their fingers at her. Yes, you know, she's not making all the best choices, but neither were they, right? And so it's underwritten why she should be the villain and they get to be the heroes in some ways of these stories.
That, and they just made it so one note, and you know the Dark Phoenix saga has so much nuance to it, and you know there's and this one it was just like, oh no, crazy woman trope, you know, and rage and back to, and there was just, you know, for someone that was set up as such a vital character in the first two movies, they butchered her here, and again that's why why they thought it was a good idea to try to cram in two movies here instead of just make a proper Phoenix movie, which again they still haven't done. They tried to do that again years later, and we'll get to that later. Maybe they should just leave that storyline alone, but because the X-Men cartoon did it great. But you know, I mean, like that's what frustrates me most about this movie. Christian, I know you're itching to talk here too.
What can I say someone else hasn't said about this film? I don't know. I was 15, 16 when this came out, and I had read more of the comics. I'd experienced more of the stories. So I'm like, wait, they hinted at Phoenix coming out. That means we're going to see the Shi'ar. We're going to see, you know, Gladiator and all the other the members of the group there. It's going to be so great. And I get there, and space is a long forgotten thing. We're definitely not doing that. We got this whole Cure storyline, and we get that really cringy scene of Storm, this really attractive woman with these really great powers, looking at Rogue and saying, hey, like, how could you ever think of taking something like this, even though you can really kill anyone you touch with a literal touch? And I'm there at 15, 16 going, did you just say that? Did you not just think, with the emotional immaturity of a 16-year-old, me being able to think that through? Yeah, and I'm not going to be showing myself really well here, because I do remember saying something to the effect of this to a friend. You know, this film franchise is done, and unlike the Phoenix, it shall not be reborn from the ashes. You know, because I've always been, you know, just a snob at times. Doesn't matter how correct I can be at times. And going, man, like, this is over. This is kind of the definition of a whimper. That final battle isn't really fun. We get the Juggernaut in this film too. I was like, yes, to see the Juggernaut. And he's like this muscle-bound guy who doesn't look anything like Kane Marco. And of course, we get the classic reference to the internet meme. I'm not going to say the word because it's a family show that came from a fan parody that was of its time. And yes, I still laugh at it, but I also remember where it came from in the history of the internet in our lives. And just seeing this giant jumbled mess, you know, who approved of this? And being like morally upset as a 15, 16-year-old, like, I got to find a person who did this because they destroyed this film franchise. It's awful. And yeah, some of those thoughts haven't changed. And you know, it's in hindsight, I can look back and see how Hollywood interferes with a lot of its things, how executives get in the way of things, and how the best writers aren't always involved. Like, you naively think that they're only hiring the best of the best because they want to give the best product possible, instead of just like, hey, continue to consume product because you idiots came for the last one, you'll come for this one too. I learned a lot at that time. And Spider-Man 3 was no exception either.
We just want to take a moment to ask you all to consider sponsoring our show. You can do so by becoming a member in the website down in the show's description. It takes a lot to keep this show running, as far as editing equipment, paying the site that platforms our show to, all the different mediums where you listen to your podcast, going to events. There's a lot of cost behind this. And I was thinking of the most fun way to do this ad, and I was going to do like, you know, one of those songs where it's like, there's a log on the lake, and then by the end, it's like there's a speck in the eye of the flea on the log on the lake or something. Then I realized that would just take too long, and I don't want to bore you guys. So I'm going to list some of the benefits you can get for being a member as a thank you to those who do take some of their funds to help sponsor our show. At the free tier, you get some perks, including like free episodes. Yeah, you don't even have to pay to get extra content that goes along with our annual theme, or even in collaboration with the Rethinking Faith, we're going to be doing Rethinking Comics, and you can get that on our website if you want to follow that series. As you move up to some of the paid tiers, you get access to exclusive merch only for our sponsors. You get access to the bonus questions we do each thing, and all kinds of things that are like shout outs for all tiers. You can get a shout out on the episode. All of the tiers come with some incredible benefits. As you go through some of the different ones moving up, you get different % off of our merchandise. We just straight up give you money towards purchasing stuff. Some of the tiers just get $10 a month to buy stuff from us. We do free giveaways. Some of the tiers come with birthday presents, Christmas presents, free t-shirts for our members. There are lots of things that we do because we just want to show our appreciation for those who are able to take their funds and sponsor our show. But we also want to remind you, whether or not you can financially support the show, we appreciate everyone who takes their time to listen to this. Remember that verse that's like, perhaps you're here for a time such as this. Well, perhaps you're here for a time such as sponsoring our show, or perhaps you're not here to listen to ads, and I should wrap this up.
And I'm glad you brought up that scene between Storm and Rogue, because so this is why I go back to, yeah, it would have been fascinating if they had done a proper movie that explored the Cure storyline and really got to dig into it, because they hint at stuff here that's really interesting, but then they don't really, they make it really one-dimensional because they're also cramming another movie into this. But, for me, this is why the X-Men have always been fascinating, because, as a disabled person, like, the X-Men speak to really any marginalized community. I mean, that's what they're like, their metaphors are there. And the Cure storyline is especially, meaningful for me as a disabled person, because those same arguments are there in the disability community when they talk about cures and treatments. And, there are a lot of disabled people who I understand the mentality of, oh, I don't want to be fixed. I don't need it. And I'm in this mode too of like, I don't, I'm not, waking up every day like, oh, I wish I could walk. I'm like, I've been in a wheelchair my whole life. It's very normal for me. So but then but I have friends who, they got disabled, later in life, received a diagnosis. And so it, had a really profound impact on them. And they are more desperate for, the kind of return to their old life. And because of that makes, Kira's storyline this a very relevant, very interesting. And if they had done it properly and done a very nuanced conversation, but instead, like you said, they have scenes like that where it's just like dismissing, and you 100% understand why Rogue would be interested in this, because her powers in this universe literally kill other people, and she wants normalcy, whereas someone like Storm, she has really awesome powers that can do do cool stuff. So but if they had explored that more, instead of, oh, we just got to keep moving the plot along, we have to cram in Phoenix, we have to do all this stuff, and it made the writing really atrocious. And also it doesn't help too that we talked so much about X2 being great visually and still holding up all these years later. The CG is pretty horrendous in this movie. There are some awful looking sequences right from the beginning when Xavier and Magneto go to the flashback scene where they visit. Well, it's not as bad there, but still the de-aging wasn't, great back then. But especially the Xavier death scene is for something that's supposed to be really, tragic and have an impact. It's just done horribly. It looks like a computer falling apart, not, a person dying. It's just, just slop all over. That's
the other thing. Sorry, I forgot something. Cyclops is dead.
Yes. Oh,
yeah.
gosh.
If you're watching this on YouTube, I have Cyclops deserve better. This is when we really get Wolverine and friends. So if your name is Wolverine, oh, too bad, buddy. Even though you're the leader of the X-Men, you're boring because we haven't given you a character. Therefore, you can die. And yeah, like you said, there were things with the actor having other projects to do at the time. But
still,
this is how we let Scott Summers die.
Yeah. No,
they didn't have any trouble recasting every other character.
Seriously,
as needed.
Yeah, right?
No, it's still one of the most egregious mistakes this franchise has made. And they still haven't really gotten Cyclops right. Just from that image from the Doomsday, one of the X-Men teaser there, and you get to see James Marsden in the classic suit. I'm like, that alone gives me hope, and I hope they, and I mean, granted, I don't expect like a ton of it's hard for me to see a lot of character development or and shit when they have like a million people in the cast for that movie, but we'll get to that, throughout this series. But yeah, no, it's absolutely, that's why I said, when I was rewatching this, I'm like, all right, the first 20 minutes I could kind of get, okay, there, because it's focused on the Cure storyline. Aside from that opening scene, it's like, okay, we're moving along, like this makes sense. And I do really love the danger room scene, I'll give them that. That was cool. And we really didn't get much of the danger room at all in this trilogy. That was like really the one scene where we got that, and we got a sentinel, so that was cool. But it's moving along.
Not even a real one.
Right, not a real one, but it was kind of a fun tease. But then, yeah, after about 20 minutes, and then they do the Cyclops death, movie falls apart after that. And I mean, there's still watchable elements. Again, anytime Beast is on screen, I was happy. There was other stuff, but yeah, and Christian, you talked earlier about the Senator Kelly blob scene scarring you as a kid. The one that horrified me when I saw this in theaters as in middle school. I get why it was like trying to, but when the kid Angel's a kid, tried to cut off his wings at the guy, like that was terrifying. And then it cuts to the title sequence. I'm like, that was terrifying, and it was just really grotesque. I mean, I get that was the intention, but still, that scarred me as a kid. Yeah. So but that's another thing. Angel is brought in here. And I mean, very wasted, because there's another element that was set up as an interesting, it's like, okay, he was, terrified of being a mutant, and but he wants to have a relationship with his father, but his father is heading up the Cure facility and the whole project and funding it. There was an opportunity there to explore that relationship, and instead they give the dude a few lines, and they have him do a couple flying sequences. There was a lot of rewatching this. There are a lot of interesting elements here, but none of them really play out in a meaningful way. It all just comes crashing down because they tried to cram so much, and there was all the conflicting visions here. There were if they had given this one the time and written it properly and done, again, I think if they had done the Cure storyline here, Wolverine could have taken a sidestep and then maybe bring him back in the Phoenix movie. And I think that would have been really good, but there's instead, they try to do Xavier's death, Dark Phoenix, the Cure storyline, bring in Beast, bring in Angel. It's just boom, boom, boom. Everything that really worked about X2, just really, it's the opposite here. Yeah.
No argument for me.
Yeah. So it's it's a shame. And this very much, I think, did lead to a massive reboot, which we'll get into in another episode. And I am excited for that, because they're now talking about another one where a teaser for me is started off really good, and then the latter half, oof, yeah. We'll get there. But yeah. So Last Stand, I mean, yeah, it's a mess. It does have its moments, and there's a lot they could have done, but ultimately, I think it's plagued by not just bad writing, but cramming two scripts into one and trying to make some coherent thing out of it, and then a poor director, poor CG, all of that. You get some cool, the cast still gives it their all again, and not just I know I love Kelsey Grammer's Beast, but I think Elliot Page's Kitty works well still. There's still some great movements from Wolverine and Rogue. Of course, Magneto. There's still elements. And then another line equal to the Toad line in the first movie that I just cringe so much every time I hear it. I mean, it's Xavier saying it, so it's that. But when he says to Storm, "Well, you of all people know how fast the weather changes," oof. Like, there's a difference between fun, cheesy, meta stuff and then that. But yeah, so I don't know. Andy, do you have any other thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, you touched on the Cure and the relationship to disability conversations, whatever. Mm-hmm. It especially struck me, all the conversation about autism at the moment.
Yes.
And so yeah, the Storm Rogue conversation was quite tone deaf. And then also shocking was I'd forgotten that the X-Men used the cure weapons against Magneto in the finale.
Yep. I know.
That's a pretty
ethical implications of that one.
Yeah, that is unconsidered. You can see where it's convenient narratively to kind of wrap up some things in the finale. But it is ethically dubious. It is somewhat out of character for everyone.
When Magneto says right before the final battle, like, traitors to their own kind, I'm like, I can't disagree with you there. Like, I mean, once that happens, Yeah,
I've never really been a big Magneto was right guy, but watching these movies, maybe just the Ian McKellen gravitas, but these movies give a lot of opportunities for you to go, well, maybe Magneto had a point.
Yeah, that was I hate that moment. Like, it's, like, I get, like, in terms of the battle, okay, I get why the X-Men are there because they're protecting the kid there more than anything. Like, right. Because Magneto and his army are going to go and kill the kid. Like, obviously the X-Men will stand for, regardless of, even though they're against, the military having the cure as a weapon. But why they would use it, I hate it. Yeah. Because you've got Beast and Magneto, like, they could still have stopped him there without, quote unquote, curing him. And then, of course, it didn't even work because by the end of the movie, they have the final shot of Magneto moving the chess piece, and we'll see him again in Days of Future Past. So that it all ended up being for nothing anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so it's Last Stand. Yeah, it's Last Stand. But all that said, first, guys, this has been so much fun. I'm really excited for this series, and this will be a blast going through all these movies. But yeah, if you had to rank them, where would you put just for these three movies?
2, 1, 3. Simple enough.
Same. Yeah, same.
Yeah, it's no question.
Yeah. This might be the first time we're all I think. How often do we have a ranking that is universal?
This could create world peace right here.
That's all we have. Everyone rank the X-Men, the first X-Men trilogy, and I dare anyone to have different opinions on there.
And that's why Joshua isn't on this episode, because I'm sure it'd be the exact wrong one.
He'd be like, well, guys, Last Stand is actually, that would be, But, yeah. Well, no, this was, a ton of fun. And then, just a couple closing questions here I have is, if the franchise hadn't been rebooted several years later, what would you have wanted from a fourth X-Men movie with this cast? I know I kind of already said I wish they had just split the two movies here up into two and done Cure first and then Dark Phoenix. That would have been my preference. But if they hadn't done that, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to think what, do you guys have any idea for, with this cast, what a fourth might have looked like to kind of redeem this one?
I mean, my idea would have been, if I could have changed the third movie, it would have been Hellfire Club, Shi'ar, Dark Phoenix.
Yeah.
And then 4 would have been Mr. Sinister leading up to a 5th movie with Apocalypse.
I like it.
Yeah, I was thinking, I mentioned my headcanon about Jamie Madrox in Muir Island. That's where the final scene goes, right? The credit tease. And so, yeah, I think you need to follow up on that. Moira McTaggart, who has her own regrets about the past, right? Discovers that you can transfer a consciousness from one mind from one body to another. And so, starts to wonder if there's a way to send a mind back in time to fix some of the mistakes that she's made in her own past with her own son, Proteus. And, so I think there's something there where you could do kind of like a Days of Future Past, but a different spin on it. And that instead of going from the future to the present, you're going from the present into the past. You can maybe kind of mash it up with an Age of Apocalypse kind of thing. So maybe she sends somebody back in time. Maybe Bishop, right? You bring in Bishop as a time traveler. She finds some way to send Bishop back in time to change something about in the past about Proteus, and that changes the timeline, and we get some kind of alternate present Age of Apocalypse style. Maybe it doesn't involve Apocalypse because you haven't set him up yet, but some kind of maybe it's more of a Days of Future Past alternate present where mutants are in camps or something like that, since they've built up a lot of those kinds of themes in the previous films. But yeah, I don't have a full treatment yet, but I think something something along those lines is where it seemed to me it should go next. Build, if you're going to use what you've got already.
I like that a lot. Awesome. And also, just a fun question. I'm curious if you guys were mutants, what powers would you want to have? I think for me, I'd want night crawlers because it would make travel so much easier. I mean, if I could just, I realize I still don't, but if I could just get from one place to another like that, it would be great.
Yeah, my answer to this is always going to be telekinesis, because depending on how you define it, it could be used in ways that go beyond what you'd expect. I mean, you could essentially become the Avatar and bend all the elements. You could potentially create black holes and time travel. It's kind of very multifaceted. If I only just get telekinesis and I can bring my drink closer to me all the time, I'm fine with that too.
That would be awesome. I love it. Andy, are you going to be multiple man, or are you or something different?
I do like that idea, but I also very much like the idea of just being able to fly. I think I want to fly.
Can't go wrong there. I love it.
It's classic for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been great. And just wrapping up here. Well, first of all, for listeners out there, thank you so much for joining tonight. I also want to give a shout out to one of our supporters, Ethan Overcash. Thank you so much. But before we go, do you guys have any recommendations you want to share, either related to X-Men or it could be something totally different?
For me, the Space Ghost comics right now, they're being released. Fantastic. They incorporated plenty of good things from the 60s episodes and the 80s episodes, even a little bit from the 2000s run. That was a comics run that happened way back then. Really, really fun.
Awesome. Andy, what about you?
Yeah, thinking a lot about Nightcrawler in this episode in the standout sequence in X2, and so one of the best Nightcrawler moments for me recently was in the AXE crossover that Kieran Gillen kind of architected for Marvel Comics. So Avengers, X-Men, and Eternals. It is probably impenetrable nonsense if you're not up on the X-Men Krakoa era and the Eternals and a whole bunch of other continuity at the time. But there are some really great Nightcrawler moments in that as well. So it's an interesting story that deals with some of these same big themes of what do you do with absolute power, and who gets to make these important decisions and those kinds of questions. So there's some thematic resonance there as well. But hopefully even if you're coming into it cold, you'll get something good out of it.
Very cool. And then for me, I know everyone talks about the 90s X-Men animated series, which is great. But if you've never seen X-Men Evolution, highly recommend. That's another one I grew up on. And that one, in some ways, I like it even more. It puts the main mutants in high school, like Wolverine and Storm are adults, but Cyclops, Jean, Nightcrawler, all of them are teenagers. And it has mirrors to the movies, but it's still its own story. The animation still holds up. That's a really fun one, especially if you like Young Justice, stuff like that. There's a lot of comparisons there, so check that out on Disney Plus if you've never seen it. But awesome, guys. Well, yes, as we prep for Doomsday, we will be doing many more of these episodes. I haven't decided for the next one, if we're going to start with MCU or do the next set of X-Men films. We'll talk and figure that out. But we've got plenty to discuss throughout the year. So thank you all for joining us tonight. This is Andy, Christian. This has been a blast. And for listeners, viewers out there, remember, we are all a chosen people, a geekdom of priests. Peace, y'all.
Thank you all so much for your time listening to this episode. If you want to help sponsor our show, but you can't quite do the membership thing, commit to that once a month payment, good news, you can leave a donation on our Fourth Wall website. You also can get some free content over there. So if you don't have the money for the membership, but you still want to hear some of the extras and bonuses we do over on Fourth Wall, there's an option for that. If you want to support the show without that commitment every month, again, you can donate over there. Every little bit helps. Our show has a lot of needs when it comes to equipment, when it comes to going to some of the events we want to go to, advertising, getting the word out about our show. It takes a lot, and we really appreciate each and every person who's able to help us do it, even if it's something free, just like the free membership or leaving a rate and review on our site. Every little bit helps. Your time listening to this helps, and we appreciate all of you We're so proud of the community we formed over at Systematic Geekology, and we're very happy and we're proud that you're a part of it. Thank you so much for your time and for being a part of this community.
Hello, friends. This is Andy Walsh. Thanks for listening. If you're going to be a systematic geek about this podcast, you need to know that it's part of the Anado Podcast Network. Other shows in the network include the Whole Church Podcast, where Joshua Knoll and TJ Blackwell have spent over 7 years now in pursuit of church unity through education and conversations with leaders across traditions. 7 years, that's a podcast that has lost some baby teeth. My Seminary Life with Brandon Knight, where he began discussing what he learned as a seminary student and is now learning with the listeners in a continuing lifelong education. The Bible After Hours with the Foul-Mouthed Preacher, where he critically examines the modern church through satire, then provides a more progressive reading of Scripture. And the Homily with Pastor Chill Will from Chapel Hill, where Will Rose's homilies are periodically updated and made available through the podcast, always reminding us that we are loved with a love deeper than words. Thanks again for listening, and remember, if you're going to geek, do it systematically.